Welcome to Causing the Effect, a podcast focused on the exploration of your mind, body, and spirit.
Dr. Demartini, how are you, sir? Happy holidays. What's going on?
Oh, I'm just busy to be, and it's holiday time, and I'm in the Middle East. I'm in Abu Dhabi at this moment.
Oh, so interesting. And everybody, this is Dr. Dr. John Demartini. It's funny, when I started my personal development, you were one of the first books I've read, the Demartini Method, and you could check out the episode that came out a couple months ago with giving kind of Dr. Demartini's overview. But 5 decades of research, multiple disciplines: physics, philosophy, theology, metaphysics, psychology. We're going to be talking about your new book today. Now, this new book, it seems like you put everything together with the 7 secret treasures, a transformational blueprint for a well-lived life. Now, this came out late October, so it's been out for a month or two, and I put that link on below in the notes, so feel free to click that. Mine's on the way. But how did you come to this kind of idea of the 7 secrets, and what is different from this book compared to your previous 30 to 40 books you wrote?
Well, if somebody was to ask me, what are the highest priority actions you could do to empower all areas of your life? And when I say all areas, I break life into 7 areas. I believe that people have a desire to grow a business and be a contribution, have sustainable, fair exchange with people. People would like to have financial, abundance and financial independence. They'd like to have a loving and intimate relationship. They'd like to have social influence and make a difference and have some power there. They'd like to have a vital body that looks good and is attractive and, goes a long way. They like to be inspired with a mission, something that inspires them. They like to think that they're intelligent and they've contributed ideas that will go beyond their life. So if somebody was to ask me, what are the highest priority actions I could do to assist in the empowerment and the mastery of those 7 areas? This is sort of like a distillation of some of those things that I've, through interviews and consulting and writing and workshops that I've done all these years. It's kind of a distillation. It's not a huge book. It's not this big compendium, 1,000 pages or anything. It's just a distilled, highly concise self-help action book to help you do something extraordinary in those areas.
And that's why I love your work in particular, because you want to be well-rounded in all the work you do. And I know the value chart, personal values are a big thing I see you talking about on Instagram. And it's such a differentiator for me compared to some other development gurus out there. Living by your values, how does one effectively manage that? How do they figure out their personal values in a world where you're constantly being told what you should value and what should be important to you?
Well, anytime you hear yourself saying, I've got to, I have to, I must, I should, I ought to, supposed to, and I need to, you're not living according to your own values. You've injected that imperative language from some authority that you've subordinated to and are too humble to admit what you see in them inside you. You're minimizing yourself to somebody and injecting their values. And Freud called this the superego.
Yeah.
It's an injected moral values from outer authorities. And most people then set objectives or goals, I could say, or fantasies to live in other people's values, and then wonder why they don't have, long-term focus, because you're going to not stay focused on something that's not really truly important to you. I was in Johannesburg speaking in 2013 at a success summit, they called it. And Richard Branson was one of the speakers. He closed it, I opened it. And it was really interesting because I asked people, because there's 5,000 entrepreneurs sitting in front of me. And I was the first speaker, and I said, how many of you would love to be financially independent? And every hand went up. Some had 2 hands up. Some had 2 hands and a leg up. I think they could have put their legs and hands up if they could. And so they were all excited about that, which usually means that they haven't experienced it. And so they're, they have a bit of a fantasy about what this is going to do for them. And then I said, now, how many of you are financially independent where your passive income is exceeding your active income and you don't have to work except because you love to? And all the hands went down and only 7 hands were left open. Now, this is entrepreneurs, so you would expect a higher percentage, but only 7 hands were left in here. And I said, isn't that interesting that 100% of you had your hands up, but only 7 out of 5,000 people, that's less than 1%, are financially independent. Don't you think that's interesting? And it's kind of quiet all of a sudden. I said, would you like to know why? Because I've made a study of this, and I can guarantee you what I'm about to tell you is meaningful. And I would get your notepads out, get ready to write. I said, you say you want to become financially independent, but I'm going to prove to you that you don't. So I want you to pull out your pad. I'm going to hand you 10 million US dollars, which is enough for most people to be able to at least survive on. I said, I want you to have 10 million US dollars. You just received it. It's yours. You now have 60 seconds to write the 10 things you intend to do with that money. What are you going to do with that money you just got? You have 10 things to write. You got 60 seconds to write it in. What are you going to do with that $10 million? On your mark, get set, go. So they're writing as fast as they can. They're all excited and exuberant, enthused, writing as fast as they can. Oh boy, what would I could do if I had $10 million? What would I do? And I said, stop, 60 seconds is up. Turn that sheet of paper to the person to the left. Now, you just received a piece of paper. I want you to calculate how much of that money of $10 million is still an asset that will work for them. And let's take a look at how much they spent on consumables that depreciated in value. Between 20 and 80% of the $10 million was spent on consumables that depreciated within 60 seconds, which means they bought that car, they bought that house, which is lifestyle, not investment. It's not a real estate rental property. It's not a land to develop. It's not a stock that they just bought. They bought clothes, a house, a trip, a car, another car. They bought things. Mm-hmm. And most people don't know that if you have a higher value on consumable, depreciable, things that depreciate that are consumables, they go down in value. Instead of putting your money into assets that appreciate in value, you're not going to get financially independent unless that ratio slanted in the appreciable area, not depreciable area. So when people saw that, they got silent and they just went, whoa. I said, so you tell me you want to be financially independent, but what you really want is a lifestyle of the rich and famous to live beyond your means. So you really don't have the hierarchy of values that will lead you to financial independence unless you decide to have a shift today. And that's what we're going to discuss today. I said, because 99 to 100% of the world's population live in a fantasy, and they don't realize that if they don't have a hierarchy of values that has wealth building in it at the top, it's not going to happen. Money circulates in the economy from those who value it least to those who value it most, and the ones that have the least order to those that have the most order about money management. So if you don't have a value on buying assets and let it work for you and defer gratification, then you're going to have immediate gratification consumed you're going to live vicariously through other people's brands instead of building a brand that people want to buy from you. So I got their attention now, and they're going, ooh, I got a guy that sat next to me and just told me the ratio. So I can't lie, I can't put on my facade. I'm humbled. Here I am. Now I got their attention. And I said, you have a hierarchy of values, a set of priorities in your life. This hierarchy of values dictates how you perceive, how you decide, and how you act. And it also determines what you do with money. If you have a very high value on buying a house, more than buying stocks, you're going to end up buying a house. Then you're going to fill it with stuff. Then you're going to pay taxes. You're going to pay, and you're not buying something that's putting money in your pocket. You're buying something that's taking money out of your pocket. I said, so the hierarchy of your values dictates your financial destiny. And whatever is highest on your value, you spontaneously do. And whatever is low on your values, you need to be motivated to do. So if you don't have a value in wealth building, unless we have a shift in that today, the probability of you being financially independent is about the same ratio as the world out there, which is 1%. So you have to decide today. I want you to make a real clear decision. Do you really, really, really want to be wealthy and financially independent? Are you willing to sacrifice immediate gratification for long-term, return? Are you really willing to buy and learn about it and educate yourself about it and build wealth? Or are you just wanting to talk about it in fluffy, it's just superficial language? And it was quiet. People are really soul searching. I said, because that's what my topic today is about. So what I do is I'm certain that people make decisions according to what they think is going to give them the greatest advantage over disadvantage at any moment in time to what they value most. And most people don't really value wealth building. They value things. They can't seem to get it. I have a guy that was eating $300 a day. Now add that up, that's $10,000 a month on eating. He had to have wine. He had to have fancy food. He had to take people to dinner. His life was gluttony. He was obese. His life was gluttony. And he was not able to pay his rent. He was behind on his taxes. They had to repo his car, but he was eating $10,000 a month on food. He had a higher value on food than all those other things. I also met a lady that only made $2,000 a month and was saving 400 of that and investing 400 of that every single month and was closer to financial independent. And she worked for a guy that made $6.29 million in 1 year. And he was behind and owed $327,000 in taxes. So it doesn't matter how much you make, it has everything to do with how you manage it. And that's based on the hierarchy of your values. So every talk I do goes back to values. And most people don't realize that they have a fantasy about who they are. You tell me what your highest values are, I'll tell you who you are. My highest value is teaching. I'm a teacher. But many people don't know that. I've been doing value determinations for 45 years out of the 50 years I've been teaching. I've only met one individual, a woman from Israel, that had congruency. What she said and what she lived were exactly the same. 99% of the world's population think they know themselves, but they don't look at what their actions are. They quote what they think it should be, what they ought to be, what they hope it will be, what they fantasize it be, and then they self-defeat. And then they think they have limiting beliefs and they keep sabotaging. And no, they don't. They just don't know what they're really making decisions around.
One person you found that's integrated in all of your travels, one person that matched their actions, matched their words. That speaks a lot. And this was, you were in a room of successful entrepreneurs listening to Richard Brett. What are the schmucks on the street doing with their money and all this stuff? So I guess that bears the question: how does one become aware of this unconscious living that they're doing? Like, you even put it in my head a little bit. They're like, wow, I should look at XYZ. Because when you said that $10 million to me, first I said, put half into one of my clients who's going to invest that money. But I know a lot aren't like me. And you said another interesting piece there, Dr. Demartini, because I know some people think buying a house is an asset. I'm building equity and all that. For me, that doesn't work for me either. Could you give a little bit more detail for the youngsters, for you motherfuckers listening? You know, I fought with you about this. Stop buying a house in New York. Dr. Demartini, all you people have to want to do is buy a house at 30 so they could show off and say, well, I have a house. Why? Why doesn't that work?
Can I shatter that myth?
Yes, please. Please do. Please do.
I had some fun in in Australia, pardon me. Because in Australia, real estate's a very common thing that people do to try to get wealth. And so I told him that 25% of a house is closets and garage. And the average house is at least $1 million there.
Mm-hmm.
So that's $250,000 on a garage and closet. And what you store in there are all depreciables. Clothes that you never wear, that you think you're going to get around to wearing. A car that depreciates the second you buy it, 18% the day after. You know, and things that cost. And then I said, you're paying $250,000 for it, but over the period of 25 years, you're paying nearly 700,000.
Mm-hmm.
When you add up all the cost on it. Now the interest that you could have earned on that difference, if you had bought real investments, and maybe in some cases looked at the cycle, it may have been wiser to rent and keep a simple profile. I mean, you know, look at Warren Buffett. He's lived in the same house for 60 something years, and he's wealthy because he's not extravagant. He doesn't waste his money. But 25% of that house is going down. You're paying for that. And I know people that actually have a car in the garage the first few years, but after a while they accumulate so much stuff in the garage, they can't even get it in their own garage. They fill it with stuff, bicycles, all the stuff that they think they're going to use. And then you end up paying for the mortgage, and you're now paying for taxes, and you're now paying for school taxes. You're now paying for upkeep and maintenance and insurance and security and landscaping and painting and retiling and the roof and this and that. You add it up. That's probably not the most significant investment by any means. I don't even classify as investment because it's not putting money in your pocket. Oh, you could say, well, it's going up in value, but by the time you paid it, you are assuming what you paid at the beginning, the amount, $1 million, is what you actually paid for. But you actually paid with all the compounding of interest, and they front load the interest on the mortgage companies. So you really paid 3 to 4 times that amount. So that what you mean is you really got a break-even deal, and you might have been able to invest the difference and probably rent a lot cheaper. In Australia, you can definitely rent cheaper than it is to buy. But people have a mindset, I got to have a house for security. In some cases in the market cycle, it might be to your advantage. Other cases, it's definitely not in your advantage. So you need to be intelligent. But you need to know what a difference between an asset and liability is. And an asset is something that puts money in your pocket, that it goes up in value, it appreciates in value. And something that's depreciable is going down in value, and a liability. So if you don't know the difference and you just make an assumption, at one point in America, they created suburbs because they knew that if they were to go to suburbs, the banks, you know, master plan this. I read a great book on this years ago, 40 years ago. The banks said if we could get people to move to the suburbs, they would all have to have a car. Then they'd have their own house with their own fences, and they need security systems. And we own part of that security system. So they really took, and then they've got to drive all this distance and lose time. And then they got to have a mortgage on the house. And then they got to get a loan for the car. And they took advantage of the good life that they painted in order to get the money from people that were really unaware about management of money. And then they did, you know, fractional reserves. And so you end up giving them 1,000, they can rent out, or what do you call it, loan out 10,000, and then they'll pay you a small fee. So when you stop and think about this, and then they'll over leverage it and sell your loans. And then, you know, this is what the debacle was in 2008. So I don't use banks that way unless I'm buying assets. You know, if you're using and buying assets to go up in value, banks can be used to leverage in your favor. But if you're not, it can be leveraged in the reverse. And most people trap themselves in a debt most of their life, thinking that showing off the house is important. I have a friend here that lives on the ship here that I live on, and he's one of the wealthiest men. and he lives in a simple place. He says, I went through all that in my 40s. You know, I had to have the big, I mean, he had a massive place. And he said, and my wife died. I said, what the hell do I need all this stuff for? It's ridiculous. I don't need to prove to anybody. I'm extremely wealthy. I don't need to prove to anybody. I don't need to show off anything. It's time consuming. It's costly. It's a sinkhole for many people. And so they have to stop and ask what's really their priorities. If that's their priority and they like to socialize and invite people over, then that may be a real priority, and you be honest with yourself. But if it's not, be honest with what you're spending your money on. If you've never done an inventory of how you're spending your money, it's a good thing to go through and take a look at what do you really value, because your money is revealing what you value in your life. And I know women that can't afford their rent, but they can afford their hair color every week, or they can afford their nails, and they can afford their beauty is way higher than making sure that they've actually got savings. And they're using that to try to score a very wealthy guy, for instance. And that can work against them, because if they have nothing else going for them other than their looks, they're depreciable, and they're a rental program, not a purchase plan to most men that have insights about money.
And the guys are spending all their money trying to look cool with the clothes and the dinners and the
cars and the fancy cars.
Pick it, and it doesn't make any sense. Yeah, I've been on this ever since I got divorced, and I lived that life a little bit. I said, this doesn't really make sense. Now I'm living a simple life, my little apartment, $1,700 a month. And in New York, if you don't have a house, people like look down. It's like a thing. I've let go of my ego because I'm like, listen, we're doing okay. I don't need to prove anything. But that disconnect of having to say, because I always looked at a person like, what are you about? What is your essence? What is your soul? And usually what comes up is, what do you do? How much money do you make? You know, are you married? Do you have the kids? Like these things that have been instilled in us that not knocking that. I think that would value, as Dr. Demartini said, like it's about your values. That probably does value. But for some, and I think for a lot of young kids like myself, those values just aren't quite aligned. The traditional person buying a house, having the family, it just doesn't quite line up as much as it used to.
Well, everybody has a unique set of values. They're fingerprint specific. And every human being has a tendency with their amygdala to want to be right and to live in a fantasy that other people are going to be living the way they do. So they project their values onto other people. And you hear people saying, you ought to do this, you should do this, you need to do this, you're supposed to do this, why aren't you doing this? And they're projecting their values onto you. And if you put them on a pedestal, you'll inject some of those values in your life, and then you'll end up confusing and clouding what's really important to you. And then you'll lie to yourself about it because you want to fit in and you're afraid of being rejected. And people get trapped in that, particularly in the 20s and 30-year-old range. That's a very common thing where people are trapped in that stage. By the time people hit middle age and they realize, you know what, some of the people that I thought were doing this, I now get to know that they're not who I thought. I mean, I'm amazed at how many foreclosure signs were in wealthy neighborhoods when all of a sudden the economic system of 2007 and 8 hit. People were in these big homes with big, walls around them, and it looked like they were multimillionaires, and they were selling their houses on 70 cents on the dollar. And because they were living beyond their means. I'm amazed at how many people, even if they make a lot of good money, they still live beyond their means.
Of course.
So financial independence is having your passive income exceed your active income. Now, my personal feeling is that I tell people, don't raise your lifestyle unless you raise your savings or investments and your taxes equal amounts. That's my check and balance system. And I got all my students, to the best of my ability, that I teach, to set that up in their place, particularly when they're young. Because what they do is it gets out of hand. They just start buying stuff and living beyond their means, and then they're just in a treadmill all the time, and they can't get out of debt. And then once you've got it, you can't go back easily because people get attached to it. What was once a luxury is now a necessity, kind of thing. So I tell people, don't raise the lifestyle. And at first it will seem like, well, everybody's exceeding you. But if you do, and you have your buying assets, and it starts to accumulate and compound interest starts working in your favor, all of a sudden you reach financial independence. And every month and year you go beyond that, and keep investing. you now have earned the right to escalate your lifestyle. And so the rest of your life, you'll be able to escalate it. Where the other people are living beyond their means and never have passive income, and they have to decrescendo that lifestyle when they hit 50s, 60s, and 70s because they can't afford it. They're not able to work it like they did. So people don't think long term. They're too much into immediate gratification to see what compound interest and what investments can do and the impact it has, and measure your life by the impact of how many jobs you got brought to people's lives and how much contribution you made to the world. This is part of what our fulfillment is. I guarantee going shopping, you get a little bit of high, maybe getting a nice thing, but that's not long term. But going out and making a difference in people's lives, that's way more fulfilling. So going and doing something and building a business and going and building assets and demonstrating how to live wisely in the long run are way more gratifying than living foolishly. So, I mean, I warn some of the people in the crypto world that you are doing a bit of a gambling out there instead of investing. You know, you're dealing with ungoverned systems. You're taking a risk on the greater fool theory, or hoping somebody's going to buy it. You can't have 19,500 cryptos, you know,
Yeah.
and they're all going to be active. So, these are irrationalities. And I explained to them, as Warren Buffett says, principle number one is don't lose your money. Principle number two is don't forget principle number one. And people will gamble their money away on a quick get rich scheme instead of actually buying high quality companies that serve ever greater numbers of people efficiently and effectively with a brand that's got, integrity. By that, you're going to get wealthy.
Absolutely. And the compounding interest is the key to this. The delayed gratification is the key to this. We've spoken about this a little bit. I'm glad this went a financial way, Dr. Demartini, because I never get to talk about the stuff I know, actually. If me and Dr. Demartini played a game of golf for 10 cents on hole one, and I said, let's double it every time. By the time we got to hole 18, it would be $13,000 a bet. And that, my friends, if you do that in years, 18 years, that would happen to your money. That is a key here. And I've taken this approach, Dr. Demartini, of just building a portfolio. You have your investments, your Robinhood stuff, and then you have your wealth fund. I like to have a robo-advisor or 2 or 3 of those, and just letting it sit and letting to build that nut earlier in your life when you're in your 30s. That way, like you said, you can live off the fat of the land at some point, not anytime soon, but having that. And for me, it keeps everything simple. I don't got to worry too much. I'm not trying to do all this AMC wacky bet and stuff. It's you put the money in, and from there, it's given my life like an ease that you don't really have to worry about. You worry about making more money, but an ease and almost a creativity that I think if you wake up and you're stressing about money, I don't know what that's like, but I can imagine that it's a stressful thing that you can't expand to kind of find that genius,
Well, I had at age 27, I can't say I was really financially literate yet. And I'd been in school up until 27, professional school and stuff. And a guy walked into my clinic. I opened up a clinic in October 1982. And a guy walked in who was a financial planner and I guess he was scouting and looking for doctors and potential clients. And he came in my office. He said, do you have a minute? And I did. And it was about lunchtime. So I did. I said, yeah, we'll chat. And he says, do you intend to be financially independent? I said, of course. And I was kind of a cocky, living in a fantasy at the time, thinking, of course. And he said, would you like to know the 10 questions to find out if that's true or not? Ooh, what line that was. Mm. And there was a part of me that did and didn't want to know that. And I said, okay, sure, I'd love to know those questions. He says, because if you can answer these questions and you know them off the top of your head, you have a very high probability of being financially independent. But if you don't know the answers, until you do, you can count on not ever getting financially independent. So he's got my attention. So he asked me this question. What are your total assets? Now, I know this is a bit embarrassing, but I didn't know really what an asset was at 27. I was focused on healthcare at the time and philosophy and things. I hadn't really got into economics yet. And I said, well, it depends on what you mean by an asset. How's that for a dodging question?
Oh, boy.
Yeah, he knew, he could see. I didn't know what the hell it was. So I said, what is it? What is an asset to you? He said, well, things like stock ownership, shares of stock, bonds, money market accounts earning it. Because in those days it was earning,
Bigger than today.
7% or something. And I said, okay, so what are your total assets? And I didn't have a whole lot of total assets. I had debts at 27. I just finished school and I just got a new office and I just expanded the office and I got debt. And he said, all right. And I don't care what it is, but if you don't have your financial house in a row, then you're not really serious about building wealth. So you need to know where you are. If you get in an Uber and it says, I don't know where I am, I don't know where I'm going, I don't know how to get there, he can't take you somewhere. You need to know where you're starting from. So I wrote down what assets, and it was a negative 100,000. So I was in the hole $100,000 at the time. Then he said, what are your liabilities? Well, I knew what those were. I didn't have to ask him that. I just rattled those off, and it was almost like I was proud of all the debts that I accumulated. What kind of insanity is that? I was like, I got attention because I was in debt. It's kind of interesting. But anyway, I wrote down all the debts, and I knew that pretty down to the dollar because I was paying those debts. And I wrote that down. That's how I knew I was $100,000 in the hole. Then he asked me the third question, what's your net worth? And it ended up being a negative net worth of $100,000. I owed more than I had. Now, I had potential, I had knowledge, and I had a new practice, and I had patients coming in, and I could see that it was going to go up. But at that moment, when he asked me, it was negative. The fourth question, he said, how much money, because now that you know where you are, okay, assets minus liabilities, net worth, I now know where I am. Then he asked, need to know where you want to go. And I said, well, I want to, at the time, the most I'd ever made is $100,000 a year. And I was doing that teaching while I was in school. And so I just pulled out, if I could have a passive income of $100,000, which in 1982 would be equivalent to about $600,000 now. If I could have a passive income of $100,000, I would be okay. Now, I wasn't married at the time. I didn't have as many liabilities as I did accumulate when I went through a phase of insanity. And so I wrote down I'd like to make $100,000 passive off my investments. And he just looked at me and smiled. Okay, that's fine. Whatever that amount is, that's what you say you want. And so once you get there, you're now identify yourself as financially independent, right? He says, great. Now, what interest rate, with your knowledge of investing, this is his fifth question, what investment knowledge, with your investment knowledge, what interest rate do you believe you can earn? Confidently, absolutely confidently, you can get as a minimum. Now, at the time, I felt I could do at least 8% because the money market accounts and the bonds and, municipal bonds and things were around that much. So I thought, well, I can easily get that. So I just put 8%. But then he asked, what is the average inflation rate you're going to be up against over the next decades? I said, I have no idea. He said, well, it's going to be probably, at that time, it was higher. But then it went into 20 years of really low. It's now back up again. But we went 20 years, 25 years almost, with a very low interest rate, inflation rate. So he just picked 3%. So 8% for what I could earn, 3%, which means I was really going to net 5% on my return. Mm-hmm. Then he said, how much money do you need in your investments as a net worth, earning you 8% minus 3%, to give you $100,000 a year? And I didn't know how to do that. And I had to think it through, and he helped me out with a little calculator. Because that's really 5%, and 5% and 100% is 20, right? Divided by 20. So I multiplied 100,000 times 20, and I needed $2 million. But the next question was, what's the shortfall between what you need and your current net worth? and I was a negative 100,000. So I needed $2,100,000 today to produce a net return of $100,000 a year in my life, earning 5% net, which is 8% minus inflation. So I thought, okay. So then he said this question, now that we know what you're targeting for, we know where you want to go, because we know what you want to get on per year. We know what we've calculated out. It's not fantasy, it's real numbers. You know where you're starting. Now the next question, number 9, what's your strategy? How you intend to do this? And I thought, I have no friggin' idea. Now, at the time, I was saving $200 a month because I was paying off debt. I had a value on more on other people and not upsetting people than I did on saving and investing. So I was only saving $200 a month at 27, and I was paying off $2,000 on this loan and, you know, $400 on the car and this and that. And I was just paying out debt all the time. So I couldn't come up with a strategy. And I thought, well, okay, I have no idea how I'm going to get $2,100,000 in the next 24 hours. So then I thought, well, in 2 days, 48 hours, could I get $1,050,000 in 2 days in a row? I couldn't come up with anything. $525,000 for the next 4 days. And I kept doubling the number of days and having the number. And no matter what I did, it just got, I don't know how I'm going to do that. I still don't know how I'm going to do it. I still don't see a way of doing that. And I stretched that thing out over 18 years. And I thought, I kept stretching it out months. At first I tried 15 years. And then I realized with inflation, I'm going to need 4 million. So then I thought, well, 15 years is 180 months. So 180 months into 4 million is $22,000 a month. I got to average $22,000 a month growing my assets to get that goal in the next 15 years. And I'm saving 1/100th of that. So I had a headache. It was just throbbing. My stomach was a knot. I had an itchy ass. I mean, I was sitting there going, and I was having this, what you could call it is identity crisis. I had this fantasy I was going to be financially well off somehow in my life. I just had this belief and fantasy, but I had no strategy. I had no idea how I was going to do it. And I said, I need to go and relieve my bladder. And I went down to the bathroom and just sat on the can. Normally I stand, but it knocked me off my feet. And I'm sitting there and I'm thinking, how the hell am I going to do this? And I'm embarrassed because I thought I was really going to get this done. And right now, I don't see a strategy. So I came back with a throbbing headache and I said, I don't know. And then all of a sudden, right there, as I said that, something popped in my head. Something simple, something that changed my financial destiny. And I came up with a thing called the Force Accelerated Savings Technique and the Force Automated Investment Technique, FAST and FATE. And I thought, one thing I could do is I could say, I know I can do $200 a month, but I bet that as each month goes by, I can probably increase that. So what I did is I saved $200 a month for 3 months. Then I raised it to $300 a month for 3 months. Then I raised it to $500 a month for 3 months. Then $750 for 3 months. Then $1,000 for 3 months. At the end of 1,000, when I got to $1,000 a month, I ran a projection of where I would be. And I thought, I will have my first million in 34 years. But that's not going to give me financial independence. I'm never going to make financial independence saving $1,000 a month. But I didn't stop there. I made a commitment that time that I'm going to raise my savings and investments by 10% every quarter, because I can handle a 10% change without a reaction. So I made it 1,100, and I ran another projection. Instead of 34 years, it was now 31 years. And I'd be a millionaire. And then I raised it to 1,210. And I ran another projection 3 months later. And I'm down at 29 years, just under 29 years. And I'll be now a millionaire. And then I made it $1,344. I kept increasing at 10%, which is a Pascal triangle, a binomial equation. And I ran it again, and I'm now down to almost 25 years, 25 and a half years. And I go, this is inspiring. And then I did it again, 1,466. And I'm down at 21 years, almost 22 years. And then I made it 1,577. And every 2 years, I doubled the amount. So at the end of the third year, I was now at $2,000. And people go, well, that's not a lot. Oh, but wait, that next year, I paid off a loan. And that $400 was now added. So now I'm saving $2,400. And now 10% of $2,400 is $240 more. And I ran a projection. And then all of a sudden, about 6 months later, I had my other loan that was paid off. And I put $2,400 into that on top of what I was saving. So now I'm saving $5,600. And now I'm doing it 10% every quarter. And I just kept increasing it every quarter. And every time I did, I kept trying to delegate more stuff and refine and prioritize what I did so I'd be more efficient, effective at work. And I got to a point where I became very proficient at work and hired specialists and extracted surplus labor value and got on to doing the thing that produced the most income and learned to delegate and not do low priority things which devalue you. And all of a sudden, at the end of 9 years, I'd reached financial independence. I already got past my first million. 9 years, I was financially independent, and I couldn't see that when I started. But I didn't stop there. I kept increasing my savings, my investment. Well, at first it was savings. Once I had a cash reserve, it all went to investments. I started buying index funds, just buying index funds, low cost, low turnover index funds, S&P 500 and stuff. And I started buying those and buying those and buying those every single week. Every week like clockwork, I just kept buying assets. And I had to calm my wife down from wanting to spend money. You know, she wanted to, well, we can do this. And I said, you don't have a value in wealth building. No, I'm not letting your values interfere with this. You can hate me, you can divorce me, but I'm not stopping, because if you are patient, I'm going to build you a house. We're going to do those things you want, but we're going to do it smart. So now I'm saving 8,000, 16,000. Every 2 years, it's doubling, 64,000, 128,000 a month. And what I was now putting away in a year, it was once 35 to 40 years in the future when I first started. And all of a sudden now the compounding starts going. I got 41 years of compounding now. At first, it's like this. The second decade, it's like that. The third decade, it's like that. The fourth decade, it's about like that. Fifth decade, it's almost vertical. So people, if they just go and look up the eighth wonder of the world, as Einstein calls it, compound interest, and take a look at a chart and just look at what it does and the acceleration that it does and the appreciation of what it does, it will be more likely to pass up immediate gratification for long-term return. And today, I'm the one that had the lifestyle that has earned it, and I got more money coming in than I will ever use in my lifestyle. And that's because I was patient, and that's because I was methodical, strategic. I used my executive center, not my amygdala. Amygdalas are involved in impulses and instincts, and they try to time the market. And people that are patient and they just get in the market over time, those are the people that make their wealth.
Yes. Oh
And
my God.
They look for ways of serving people. They put their money into companies that serve, and they look for ways to building companies that serve vast numbers of people.
All powerful stuff, and I'm so glad that we got to kind of discuss that piece. And then you mentioned something that you mentioned in the book, the executive center, as you call it, the powerhouse of your brain. What is the executive center? How do you develop it, and how do you use that to achieve your life's unique mission? That's more of a general life's mission.
Okay, the executive center or executive functioning center, or whatever you want to call it, is primarily the prefrontal cortex, and really the medial prefrontal cortex. Medial means the central. And in Scientific American, I believe in October or September this year, they had a fantastic article on describing the self. What exactly is the self? And they've identified the medial prefrontal cortex as the seat of the self. So this is your most authentic self. Now, the executive center has got nerve fibers that go down into the amygdala, and they calm the impulses and instincts, which are the distractors of wealth building. Distractors of wealth building is immediate gratifying pleasures and phobias, fears. Those two, greed and fear, they call it in the financial world. And so the executive center calms it down and moderates it. And literally with its GABA and glutamate, which are transmitters that regulate and modulate these impulses and instincts, it calms it down and keeps you strategically focused. And it helps you transcend subjective biases, which distort your reality and perception, and allows you to be objective where you're more neutral. So you're seeing both sides of things. If you don't see both sides of things, you really don't know what investment is. If you don't know the risk and reward, and all you see is the reward, you don't see the risk, well, you're foolish, And so it's wise to make sure that you put your money into something that you know the pros and cons of, and you know the volatilities, you know what the mean is, the real intrinsic value of that asset. And if you do, you're not going to set unrealistic expectations and then be angry and hurt and then impulsively react with instincts and do foolish things. The most common thing that throws people off is their emotions. Warren Buffett says, until you can manage your emotions, don't expect to manage money, because your amygdala doesn't make you wealthy. The amygdala is your animal brain. It's systems one thinking, which reacts before it thinks. It's the thinker who plans, is methodical, who's patient, and buys, knows the risks, doesn't get distracted, keeps cash reserves on hand, so no matter what happens, you don't interfere with, you don't ever have to buy or sell, or you just stay asset accumulating. Those are the people that become wealthy. So the executive center is the seat of the self. And when you live by highest priorities, every human being has a set of priorities in their life. When you live by the highest priority, delegating lower priorities, the executive center becomes stronger. And every time you're living by lower priorities, the amygdala becomes stronger. And the animal brain becomes stronger. So if you don't prioritize your life and fill your day with high priority actions that really inspire you, that are very meaningful, that are purposeful and strategic for a long-term mission and objective, you're not going to maximize your executive center, and you're going to let the animal mind run you and distract you from wealth building. Or as Robert Greene says, if you can't manage your emotions, don't expect to be a leader. You won't lead yourself. The amygdala is an impulse. And the amygdala, what it does, it assigns valency to misperceptions that are subjective for survival purposes. If you need to capture a prey, an animal capture a prey, it has to subjectively distort its reality to get the adrenaline strong enough to run fast enough to catch the prey. It has to do the same thing on a predator to avoid it with an instinct. So it's designed for subjective distortions of reality with false positives and false negatives and subjective confirmation bias and disconfirmation biases. It's designed, and people can't make wise decisions from that. They can make emergency decisions, but not long-term decisions. That's why unless you're in your executive center, don't expect to be wealthy. You're going to be impulsing. And most day traders and most people that are using other people's money to make a fortune off other people's money, most of them are in the amygdala. And I personally have I've spoken at many financial institutions, from Merrill Lynch to Fidelity to Oppenheimer to you name it. And very small percentage of those people I would hand money to.
So the amygdala is distorting that chance, or that unique genius, that wisdom, that intuition almost, that you could use your gut. Because I'm a big feeling of when your mind is clear and your whatever your shtick is, mind meditating. But when my mind is clear, I could really trust my not so much an instinct, but my intuition. What is my heart telling me? Does that make sense, or am I going too woo-woo, Dr. Demartini?
No. But let me clarify it, because there's a common oversight that people make. So I want to make sure this is clear. You have a enteric brain, the gut brain, they call it. Mm-hmm. And you also have a heart brain. And you have an executive center that's connected to the heart brain through the autonomics and hypothalamus. And you have a gut center that's connected to the amygdala through the hypothalamus. So anytime you have imbalanced ratios of perceptions, the amygdala comes online, the hypothalamus then alters the autonomics, and the gut brain gives you an impulse towards or an instinct away. Impulses are towards prey, instincts are away from predator. Now, that's not intuition, and people confuse that left and right. An intuition is a negative feedback system bringing homeostasis to the mind to try to get you in objectivity. So if you're infatuated with somebody, and let's say you're a woman and you meet this guy and you go, oh my God, this guy's intelligent. Oh my, he's amazing. I think he's the one. There's a little bit of a whispering intuition thinking of the downsides. Too good to be true. Watch out. Look for the downsides, etc. And the intuition is trying to level the playing field, bring you back out of infatuation, back into reason. Your intuition is a homeostatic negative feedback system, an interoceptive system in the brain, trying to bring you back into objectivity so you're back on track with your executive center and your authentic self. Your impulses are exaggerations of pleasure to get prey, and your instincts are exaggerations of pain to avoid predator. They're very subjectively biased. They're polarized, positive feedback dramatizations of reality for an emergency. So people interchange those words without realizing that they're completely opposite. Your intuition is trying to neutralize the polarity. Your impulses and instincts are trying to dramatize the polarity. So people who dramatize the polarity are out of control, but they're there for survival, and you need to be under survival if a train's about to run you or a dog's about to bark and bite you. But for managing money, you don't want to live that way. You don't want to be reacting by misinterpretations of reality. You will be overguessing and underguessing, and you'll be gambling. Gambling is nothing but an amygdala response. Investing is knowing the odds, knowing the mean, and knowing the probabilities in your favor, and knowing both sides of it before you act. And that's where the intuition comes in. Now, intuition is not wisdom, it's not inspiration, but it leads you there. It can guide you there. But today, intuition and gut instinct and all of them are crisscrossed in the literature. And it's just a hodgepodge of messed up psychobabble. If you understand the distinctions of what they are, you'll know that your intuition is trying to guide you to homeostasis so you can make an objective, reasonable outcome. And when it does, the way the brain is set up, it activates the hypothalamus, it activates the autonomics. They go to the intracardiac network of the heart and bring a homeostasis to the heart, activates the sinoatrial node, which then cascades through the EKG to give us a normal rhythm. And there's no asymmetrical arrhythmic behavior. But the second you're in emotions and you're polarized and you're dramatized, you get asymmetries and you get ectopic foci in the heart. So the executive center and the heart go together, and the amygdala and the gut go together. That's why when you're infatuated with somebody, you call them sweetheart, and you want to put your tongue on them because the sugar receptors are on the tip of the tongue. So, sweetheart, honey bunny, cupcake, sweetie pie, sweet and low, equal, whatever you want to call her. You call her that because your tongue wants to lick on her and chew on her and nibble on her. Excuse the expression. And then when you are resentful to somebody, not infatuated, and you see more drawbacks and benefits, the other opening, you got the mouth and you got the anus. The anus, that's why you call him a-hole, and you call him that's why you call him shithead, right? You have all the name. That's a bunch of crap. You're wasting my life, because when you are seeing more drawbacks and benefits, you think of the other end of the thing. The gut center is got the duodenum, which is right it's right at the end of the stomach, and it goes into the jejunum and ileum. Right at that lung junction right there at the duodenum is right between the mouth and the anus. And that's the seat for the gut. And we have gut impulses for the mouth and gut instincts for the anus. And we want to take food in the mouth. We want to get rid of waste in the anus. And that's the gut instinct. And it's there for survival. It's not for self-actualizing. It's not for thrival. It's not for abstraction and wisdom. Intuition is a whole nother level. And people confuse intuition with gut all the time, but they're two separate things.
So thinking with your gut and thinking with your heart are two opposite things that a person could do.
Opposite. Thinking with your gut is necessary if a car is about to run you over.
Activates the amygdala.
Yeah, that's your amygdala, because it's necessary for it's the amygdala is called systems one fast thinking. It's there for an emergency, and you don't have time to think, you just react. And you store impulses and instincts in the subconscious mind to prepare you for survival from past experiences that you never balanced in your mind. The superconscious mind, not the subconscious mind, stores all love and wisdom, and it's there to see things in objective balance. Objectivity means neutral, non-partial, non-biased, and balanced. And when you have a balanced mind, you're now in systems two thinking. You think before you react. And that's the one that you want to manage money with.
Very interesting, Dr. Demartini. Kind of blew my mind here. Now, I always like to ask, this is one of my last questions, as your philosophy, or at least this philosophy you developed, is these three phases of life. There's the past, the present, and the future. Obviously, we've spoken a lot about the future and being able to create intergenerational wealth, delaying gratification, having this conversation with the future self, the present moment, and the past. As far as you living your life, are you going through life as in your 30s, your 40s, being able to create this? This is like a final product. We're seeing decades of research, decades of work. When you were in your 20s and 30s, what kind of tools, or maybe you have a couple tips or something that you created it on your day to day that really helped you hone in to be able to focus more on the future?
Well, I had a dream when I was 17 to travel the world and step foot on every country on the face of the earth, research, learn, and teach. And I wrote that down at 17. At 18, after watching Kung Fu, David Carradine's
Yeah.
Kung Fu, he talked about a Shaolin master that he studied under, and I said, ooh, I want to master my life. That sounded cool. So I made a commitment that I was going to now empower all 7 areas of my life. I wanted to create original ideas that served human beings across the planet. I wanted to create a global business. I wanted to create financial independence. I didn't know how to do that till 27. That's when I got my head put on straight for that one. But I had that as a goal. I wanted to have a global family. I was inspired by Einstein, who said, I'm a citizen of the world. I live on a ship, as you know, called the World, that goes around the world to every country where water is. And I had a desire to meet the most amazing people on the planet. Anybody that had global influence, I wanted to hang out with them. And I've met over 4,000 of those now and interacted with them. I also want to have a vital body. I'm 68. I'm still cranking and putting in hours, more hours than most people even want to do. And like Charlie Munger, the guy asked him one time, are you going to continue to work? You're 98. He says, as long as the body will do it, I'm doing what I love to do. What else am I going to do? Why would I do anything less than what I love? Well, that's the way I look at it. And I want to create an inspiration on the planet. Not a new religion, there's plenty of those, but something that transcends, monolingual kind of thinking, or a cultural thing. It's a universal understanding. It's a mathematical understanding of the magnificence of the universe and help people live inspired. I had that as a goal. So when I was 18, I set that on there, and I started devouring every piece of literature I could to enhance the probability of those things happening. And I was on a thirsty quest all the way through university into professional school. I was reading and teaching every single day. Reading, writing, teaching, reading, writing, teaching. I still today I delegated everything in my life except teach, research, and write. I haven't cooked since I was 24. I haven't driven a car in 33 years almost. I don't do anything but teach, research, and write. That's what I've focused on since a very young age. And I realized that if you want to master your life, if you're not doing what really inspires you and you're not filling your day with the things that are high priority, you're going to devalue yourself. You're going to drain yourself. You're going to feel depreciated. You're going to feel the world's against you, and you're going to have a break on, and your amygdala is going to distract you because of the unfulfillment. And you're going to look for immediate gratification. You're going to offload decisions to other authorities, and then you're going to inject their values, and you're going to cloud the clarity of your mission. And then you're going to end up trying to be fulfilled by buying other people's brands because you want to prove to other people that you're somebody, and you get trapped. I wasn't, that's not what my interest was. My interest was to become more knowledgeable in the field of human behavior than anybody that ever lived, and be able to disseminate information. Today, I've been blessed to speak in 187 countries. and I've been reached a lot of people. And so I just kept focused on that to my 20s and my 30s. And I started my savings at 27. I was good at saving money for things up until then. You know, I had a good work ethic. I'd go buy a car, but I didn't understand investing until 27, the day that man walked into my office. That was the day financial independence began. And it is a science. It is not rocket science. And I guarantee you, Wall Street will never tell you how easy it is. They want you to think it's complex so they get your money. But it is so ridiculously simple on how to be financially independent. It eludes people. It's just that simple. And there's a great video by Charlie Munger about that, you know, that saying exactly that terminology, saying that, you know, most people don't realize that the financial institutions are trying to make it complex to keep you from feeling confident that you can do it. But it really is so simple. It's just ridiculously simple. They keep buying quality companies and just keep buying them. Don't complexify it. You know?
No,
as Warren Buffett says, when he dies, his wife is the money is going to go into the S&P 500 and it's just going to keep buying S&P 500 because you got quality companies there, and maybe a few go in and out, but overall they're monitored, they're regulated, they're governed, they have quality people. It's got some sort of a track record. You know, these are things, and it's something that are products that people need. If you put your money in those kind of things and put your money into something that is valuable. I bought a peanut butter company 41 years ago. It was around before I was born, and it will be alive and still kicking after I die. And it has a simple formula for making peanut butter, and I bought into that for many years, and it's given me a great return. It's not rocket science. It doesn't have to be. But of course, people want you to believe it. It has to be. And that's why they get your money.
They want to activate our amygdala, so then we're working out of fear.
Exactly. They want you to realize that religion, politics, healthcare systems, psychology, and the financial industries love to create moral hypocrisies and fantasies to keep you in your amygdala.
Dr. Demartini, I don't know if you got some secret juice you're on today, but this was one of the most powerful conversations I've had. And I think a lot of you young guys who want to fight me about this, the doctor's saying it, not just any doctor, decades and decades of research. Because that's how I break it down to people, Dr. Demartini. I just get in however much I get in. Half of my money's getting saved up because I'm out. Goes right into my robo-advisor, right into my Robinhood, all high quality stocks and investments. That's it. We're not trying to do crypto here. We don't want anything to do with that. You want to have fun? Call that gambling then. You can't play around with this stuff. And if you want to get financial freedom, Dr. Demartini just laid it out, and you could just play this on repeat and keep going because this clearly works for him. It's working for me. I'm on year 3 of being an adult. I feel like I'm 32, so I'm right on point with Dr. Demartini. So, thank you so much. And the 7 Secret Treasures Transformational Blueprint for a Well-Lived Life will be in the link below. Mine is on the way. And just thank you so much, Dr. Demartini. It's really always a pleasure, truly.
No, thank you. You're the one that's helping me help other people.
Hey, so we're all in this together. Exactly. We are on the same wavelength today. And just thank you guys so much for the support. If you're watching on YouTube, like and subscribe. If you're listening on Apple, thank you guys for the 100,000 downloads per month. I can't be happier with where this is going. As Dr. Demartini would say, this is the mission that kind of drives me and keeps me going every day. So that's it. As always, stay safe, stay positive, stay blessed. We'll talk to you later. Bye-bye.